Welcome back, everybody. It's Jack Raymond, John Pedersen for another. I don't know what this is. I'm thinking it's about 150 edition of We Talk Photo. Thank you all for taking some time and being here with us today. We have another. We've been really getting lucky recently, but we have another of the really good people in the business, an exceptional photographer, and one of the best workshop leaders around, Ian Plant. Ian, I'm sorry for pigeonholing you into a workshop leader, because you're a lot more than that. But welcome, Ian Plant, and thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Jack and John, for having me on. It's a real pleasure.
Um, as like we do all the time, give everybody the maybe the cliff notes on you and what you're doing in your photographic life.
Yeah, sure. So I've been a full-time professional photographer for now over 2 decades. So I think I'm coming up on 21 years. And I primarily focus on landscape and wildlife photography. So nature photography, definitely my first love and chief passion. But I like to dabble in other types of photography as well. On occasion, you might see a travel or a street photo for me or something like that. And I've been doing it now, as I said, for 21 years, and I still love every minute of it. It's been a wild ride.
And you never had to photograph a wedding.
Yeah. Maybe an animal wedding. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. John, I'll kick it off with you. You want to
Well, Ian,
start with
before the show, we were talking about your travels. You're a one of the most well-traveled working photographers still, and you just got back from Argentina, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I was in the Puna, which is it sounds like a dirty word. Uh and it sounds like Puma. People think when I say, "Hell, you
Oh,
join me on my Puma photo tour," they think we're going to go photograph mountain lions.
that
But
would
it's
be
called
cool.
the Puna, which is the high altitude desert area. It's part of the broader ecosystem that includes the Atacama Desert in
Yeah.
Chile, and then there's the Bolivian desert with the famous salt flats. It's all kind of part of the same general ecosystem. It's just that each one is distinct because it's on a different side of the Andes Mountains.
Hmm.
And so I was on the Argentina side photographing the beautiful desert landscapes there. I've been there. This is my fourth visit there, and I was leading a tour group. Actually, I tend to have bad luck with my tour groups in the Puna. Every time I've been there, I've been sick or ended up getting sick, and this was no
uh-oh.
exception. We
Oh
had
no.
a nasty little flu virus that was going around the group, and I seemed to get it the absolute worst of everyone. So we all had a fantastic time, made some beautiful photos, but most of us were feeling pretty miserable.
Wow. So was a lot of this sort of minimalist photography? So knowing like the Atacama is like
Mhm.
big open space, was it kind of the same sort of vibe there?
No, not really. The Atacama and the Puna are kind of similar in some ways, but starkly different in others. And so there are some really dramatic landscapes in the Puna. One of my favorite areas there is it's called the pumice stone field. It's this massive field of pumice stone formations. There had been a volcanic eruption there many years ago. It deposited all of this pumice stone, and the pumice stone is being eroded by a little bit by water, but mostly by wind. And you get these dramatic white pumice stone formations rising from the desert that are 20, 30, sometimes 40 or 50 feet tall, surrounded by black volcanic sand. And so it's a really dramatic landscape. It's definitely not an empty landscape. There are vast stretches of it that are like that, very just sort of big sky, empty landscape where minimalism would be an interesting choice. But there's also a lot of really dramatic landscapes that you can get yourself into. Just immerse yourself in the landscape and make some really sweeping, grand landscape photos.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's an area I've been fascinated with, but just haven't made it down.
Mm.
For those folks that are maybe thinking about going down, how safe is it traveling to that area these days?
Oh, very, very safe. Argentina
Yeah.
is a very safe country to travel. And in the Puna, you're actually in very remote wilderness, so you don't really see that many people. You probably the biggest risk you have is a flamingo attack. And
Nice.
since flamingos aren't very aggressive, that's a very low risk.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, Jack's hard at work. Um, so how many workshops do you do a year? I mean, I just kind of scanned your website and you do a ton. Seems like you're always on the go.
Yeah, I probably don't do as many as some photographers because my income is a bit more diverse, and so I do make a lot of money from my photo education platform, PhotoMasters, and some work I do with other photo education platforms like Kelby One, for example. And so I'm probably doing maybe 10 to 12 photo workshops a
Okay.
year.
All right, not too bad. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
healthy amount. So for those, why don't you tell folks about PhotoMasters?
Yeah, sure. PhotoMasters is a photo education platform that I launched a few years ago. And basically, it's the repository of all of the photo education information that's up in my brain. I just dump it out into videos and articles as much as I can. So there's free and premium resources to help photographers be the best they can be. And we also interview a lot of other professional photographers to present different perspectives and to expose our audience to many different photo styles.
Wow, that's fantastic. So you can find that on your website on your main website. Is
Yeah,
there a
yeah,
link to it?
people can go to my personal website, ianplant.com, to see more of my work and to get outgoing links to PhotoMasters and to my photo workshops and tours.
Yeah, just even scanning through the PhotoMasters website, there is so much even free content. It's amazing. I mean, from the tips to blog posts to you have this wonderful section of uh, short little blurb photo wonders. That was the site
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of. Yeah, just different areas and different photographs and just a short little description about this particular area. And I don't know how you have all the time to do all this, dude. Jeez, I get tired just looking at all of that.
I get tired doing all of it.
Yes, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I try to be active about it. I guess it snuck up on me, but it turns out I'm really passionate about photo education, sharing my experience with others,
Yeah.
and trying to just build a community of, helping like-minded individuals. And so that's in Photo Masters. Photo Wonders is just a project that I started a few years back with fellow photographer Rick Salmon, where we were just trying to document and showcase some of the amazing places we had seen around the world, and we ended up folding that into Photo Masters. So just sharing this information and helping other people really explore the artistic side of photography. That's something that I feel really strongly about.
Oh, that's fantastic. Not, and that's a topic I want to touch on here in a little bit, but not enough folks, I think, are really that interested in teaching or good at teaching. It takes a certain person to, I think, to be really good at teaching adults, especially. Yeah, and that you're doing such a wonderful job. I mean, kudos to you for that.
Oh, well, thank you, John.
Yeah, yeah. Teaching is one of those things that I've been very passionate about as well. It's because that's where most of the joy is for me is seeing the light bulb go on over somebody's head and seeing this recognition and helping people to see the world in a much more enlightened and deeper way to notice the nuances of the world around us. I mean, that's what a gift we can give other people.
Yeah, and I like the way you put that. And I think especially the way the photo industry is aligned today. That's the best way to connect with people because, not a lot of, especially with nature photographers, not a lot of nature photographers make their living anymore selling their photos.
Right.
Maybe they make some sales, but it's no longer their primary source of income. Most of us are doing photo education workshops, tours, that sort of thing. And the truth is, there's just not enough of an audience anymore for anyone's photos. Maybe you can go on social media and have a big following there. But by and large, the audience that's most interested in seeing what we're doing are other photographers, photo enthusiasts. And
Right.
so engaging in teaching those people is the best way to connect with an audience that's actually interested in your photography. And so I think it's just the reality of the way things are these days. But I think it's also a great experience. I'd love working with clients either virtually
Yeah.
or in the field. When I'm leading workshops and you show them something that they've never seen before, and you see that light bulb moment, that
Yeah.
aha moment go off in their head, and you could see it in their eyes. That's a fantastic experience for me. I'm hoping it's a good
Oh,
experience for them, and I
yeah.
love it.
Yeah. It's so rewarding. Even just basic, not even like scenes or locations where it's new to people, but even familiar things, up in the Olympics or out in the Palouse, and to show somebody a familiar subject and then show them a nuance to it or show them how to approach this photograph. And all of a sudden it's like, boom, this light goes on. And they're like, I never would have thought that or never would have seen that because it just looks like a forest. But ooh,
Yeah,
what if we do this, this, and this? And now it's a much deeper, much more connective photograph. So
yeah.
yeah, it's such a rewarding thing.
Yeah, and I think that's the essence of art is showing people something that they haven't seen before. And so, teaching people how to do that, watching them see the world in a new way is, as we said, a very rewarding experience. But I do think it's really at the core of the artistic process, whether it's photography or painting or some other form of art. It's inviting people to see the world through your eyes, through your creative vision, and it's also uncovering the hidden or maybe overlooked beauty that's out there and showing people that they never would have noticed it before. And when they see it, and
Yeah.
I think it creates a real connection with them.
Oh, yeah, I think it does too. So you touched on it real briefly though. Yeah, of course you do a lot of in-person teaching,
Mhm.
but you do some remote teaching as well.
Yeah, I do a lot of Zoom presentations with camera
Yeah.
clubs. And of course, I'm filming a lot of instructional videos. That's a little bit more impersonal. But I also, on PhotoMasters, I like to do regular webinars where I can connect with my audience and,
Oh,
have
cool.
them ask questions. So I do my very best to make myself accessible as my schedule permits.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. So as we've been talking, Jack, for those that are just listening, Jack's been having a little technical difficulties and he's been bouncing in and out, and I think he's coming back, at least I hope.
Jack is back.
I see Jack.
Yeah, well,
Uh-oh.
so much for fiber optic.
So
Sorry about that. I'm sure John was much more entertaining than I was. So
Well, we mostly talked about you, Jack, while you were
yeah.
gone. So.
I'm glad it didn't take too long. Hey, I don't know what John was. I think John was pursuing the art end of things. So how do you go about um, how do you go about explaining to your photographic clients um, how important the aspect of creativity is artistically, rather than being just another camera owner, for lack
Yeah,
of a
well,
term?
right, right. I mean, I talk about this constantly with my clients. I talk about the importance of learning composition, how to be creative with light and color, and the importance of telling a story with your photos. And so I try very hard to give people real, practical, pragmatic advice. Like I kind of find it frustrating with some photo educators. They sound like self-help gurus. They say a lot of fancy words, but there's nothing really practical. They might say something like, "You have to learn to become one with the landscape."
Yeah.
And yeah, sure, on some level that's true, but what does that really mean? How does
Yeah.
one go out and become one with the landscape, right? So a lot of it's just kind of mystical. And I try very hard to give people something that they can actually use going forward. So one way I can do that is talking a lot about composition, where I talk very pragmatically about these are the types of visual design techniques that you can use when you're making photographs. And these are proven techniques that will trigger a visual response from the viewer. This is what happens when they see these shapes being used, or if you're using these leading lines, et cetera, that sort of thing. And so I just try very hard to make sure that the advice is practical. And so when I'm working with clients in the field, I invite them into my creative process. I show them what I'm doing. I set up my camera and say, okay, this is the composition that I think works really well here. This is why. And now I'm going to wait for this particular set of weather conditions, or I'm going to wait for a certain lighting event that's going to happen. And just invite them into the process, demonstrate it in real time so that they know exactly what I'm doing and they can say, oh, yeah, I get it now. And then once they understand it, they can use that going forward. That's something that becomes part of their creative toolkit. And so, obviously there's some things you can't really teach. You can't teach someone to be creative, like learning creativity, finding your own artistic inspiration is sort of an internal journey. But at least I can teach people as many tips and techniques about composition, working with light, about storytelling, and all that other stuff, so that when they're ready for that internal creative inspiration, they've got some tools that are available to help them get there.
Well, when they're out on their own without you or anybody else.
Right, exactly.
You find that it's easier to do that in the field than in the class. Over the years, I used to do 50-50, half classroom and half field. I do probably 80-20 now in the field. I
Yeah.
find whatever I teach in the classroom, I could teach practically in the field, as long as, people are receptive to that.
Yeah, I think they work together. I think they're complementary because in the classroom I can show photos and talk about them, and we can really have a detailed discussion about the techniques that I've been using. So it's a little bit easier. It's a controlled environment to kind of drill down deeply into what's happening with each photo. But in the field, you can show people in real time. I like to use my iPhone as a teaching tool. I can show
Yeah.
people with the live view on the phone, the compositions and how the compositions change as I move the camera around. And obviously, you can't do something like that in the classroom. So I think that they work together. When I'm leading my workshops, it's usually 50-50 classroom and field time. And I think it works pretty well.
One of the frustrations, John, I think you just came off an event up in Olympic. One of the frustrations is we get people, and I'm sure Ian, you get them, who really are trying to be good photographers or be competent enough to take a decent photograph, and have a good time doing it. But they don't get out as much as they should, And I have a background in music. I don't know whether you knew that or not, but and you got to practice. I mean, yeah, you have to practice.
Yep.
And if you don't hold a camera for 3-4 weeks or a month, it takes you some time to get back in the zone. And I don't like to see people frustrated, but that's kind of what happens if they don't practice.
Yeah, and there's that challenge, and also camera systems are much more complex, and there's so many more systems and so much variation even within
Mhm.
a certain brand of camera. It used to be, you guys know, leading a workshop, you just had to know Canon and Nikon. That's
Yeah.
it, right? So
Yeah.
when people had technical problems with their cameras, I could answer them because I just had to know. Now you have to know like 6 different systems, and within each system, there's 20 different variations. And so it's gotten to the point where I tell people, hey, look, I'm shooting Sony these days. I used to shoot Canon. I can give it enough time and Google, I can figure out the specific problems you might be having with your equipment. But and if you shoot Sony or Canon, I can probably help you out. But heck, even like with Sony, if someone's got a Sony camera that's different than the one I use, it takes me forever to figure out what's going on.
Right.
And especially when people they go on workshops, and the workshop leader sets up a bunch of stuff on their camera for them. They don't know
Oh,
what's been set up.
Right.
The workshop leader just got frustrated and just set some things on the camera, and they don't know what was set. And so I can't figure out when they've got a technical problem what's causing it because it's probably one of
I
those
just had
settings.
to undo somebody who did that to one of my clients. I just had to undo all of their settings and go back. That's so frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so when I do help people with their cameras, as I said, a Google search will almost always find you the answer, even if I'm not familiar with the system.
But
I tell them exactly what I'm doing and I show it to them so they know.
kind of going back to your point about practice, Jack, one of the analogies I've made over the years was that creativity, at least for me, is like a muscle. Just like we go to the gym to work our muscles out and we build up stamina and we build up endurance and just we use our physical muscles, our creativity is like a muscle that needs to be exercised and kept in shape through practice. And if you don't, then you're going out into the field without doing your warm-ups and stretching and all that kind of stuff. And your creative muscle is not going to be as responsive as what it could be.
Yeah, I think
It's
you're,
Yeah.
preparation.
yeah, yeah, I think you're very right. Because I think, when you have an exercise your creative muscle, in a way, creativity is like riding a bike. You don't necessarily forget the creative stuff, and sometimes a bit
Right.
of a break can be good. It can kind of refresh your creativity. But I do find, at least personally, if I've had a bit of a hiatus from taking photos, when I start taking photos again, I immediately fall into old habits rather than trying something new. And so I think what you're saying is very true.
Yeah. It's a little bit safe.
Yeah, that's
Um,
why, that's why I advocate to people, you know, do photography in your local area, even if it's not the kind of photography you like doing. If you're big into nature photography, but you live in a city, go out and practice street photography. It's something you can
yes.
do when you've got spare time, and it helps you keep that creative muscle well exercised. And it also forces you to see the world in different ways than what you're normally doing. And so I always think that the best artists are the crossover artists, the people that will try different genres and then find a way to blend those very different genres together. So I think it's a good thing for people. And
You
that's a
don't
great
have to
way of
go to
getting out.
Argentina to
To do
practice
it.
your art.
Well, I think that's a great point, Ian. I mean, I was just talking during this workshop last week. I gave a talk, and one of the things I was saying is when we go out and shoot the same subject over and over and over again, to your point, I think
Mm,
oftentimes we fall into kind of old habits, and this has worked before, I'll do it again, and we don't interject any creativity.
mm,
And so when people get stuck like that, I really encourage them to go shoot something that they've never shot before or something that they're uncomfortable shooting. Like you
mm.
said, like go shoot in the city, go shoot doorknobs or manhole covers or architectural designs. Do something to change up kind of how you see the world and figure out new compositions are like puzzles. Go figure
Mhm.
out a new puzzle. And then when you come back to the genre that you really like, you're going to have a whole new vision, or at least an enlivened vision. And I think you might do some new things in your chosen genre a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, when I started out, I was all landscape, all natural landscape,
Yeah.
no sign of human beings. And, I branched out from there. Eventually, after a while, I started doing wildlife photography, a few other things. And I like to joke around that I shoot wildlife like a landscape photographer. I do a lot of wide angle wildlife photography
You and me
where
both. Yeah.
yeah, and I like to shoot landscape like a wildlife photographer. To me, the landscape itself is kind of less important. It's just sort of the canvas that I'm painting on. I'm waiting for those magical moments. You're waiting for the leopards to fight or something like that when you're doing wildlife. Well, for me, for landscape, I'm waiting for the perfect stormy cloud to drift by to interact with the shapes that are in the landscape down below. And so, doing those different genres, I think, kind of helped me approach my preferred genres in a much different and creative way.
Yes. Yep. Agreed. Agreed. So everybody who's listening, get out there and shoot something different. That's the tip of the day right there.
Just don't go into the wedding business.
No, no,
Mhm.
no.
You, you know, I like to, we all like to mock doing wedding photography. I think a lot of us think that that would be, the worst thing that we could do. But there are some amazing wedding photographers out there. I mean, I see some of the really top-notch wedding photographers. A good friend of mine, Kurt Budliger, who is, he's a landscape pro. He did wedding photography for several years, and his work was amazing. It was just so inspiring to look at
Yeah.
it. So even if you have to do wedding photography, do it well,
Yeah.
and you'll find that you're making great photos, and you're going to be learning some techniques that might be of assistance when you're doing something else.
Hey, John, you want to talk a little? We talked before we came on a little bit about the filter situation. There's two filters that
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Ian
Well, so
claims are.
as I was perusing Ian's website and Photomaster's website again in prep for this, it made me feel good and happy when there was a blog post that said there are still two essential filters you need in landscape photography. And it was
Mm.
so nice to see somebody talking still about filters because we used to carry packs and packs of filters around, so it's nice. Ian, why don't you give us a nutshell of what are those two filters that are still essential?
Yeah, so most of the filters that we used to use, we don't need anymore. So for
Right.
example, you guys probably remember the days when using color film, using color correction filters to
Yeah.
deal with changes in the color of the light, and we don't need that anymore because white balance allows us to keep up with that. Graduated neutral density filters used to be considered essential for shooting sunrises and sunsets for landscape photography. Now, most cameras have enough dynamic range that you can capture those scenes with one image, or people do exposure blending, really easy to do a merge to HDR in Lightroom or Camera Raw. But there are still two filters that you can't easily replicate the results through the camera technology or through the image editing software. And so one is a polarizer filter. So a polarizer filter is designed to remove reflections and glare from a scene. I don't use a polarizer for most of my photography. Pretty much the only time I use a polarizer is when I'm photographing waterfalls. So I think it's still essential for waterfalls. I have done waterfall photography without a polarizer, and the images can still look pretty good. But
Hmm.
with the polarizer, you're just getting rid of all that unsightly glare. So most of the time when you're shooting waterfalls and streams, you're doing so under overcast skies to get that softer, even illumination. And those gray skies above you are reflecting in anything that's wet down below. So you're getting all this gray glare on wet rocks and in the water itself. And when you polarize that away, you increase the contrast. It makes the scene just look more attractive. It also helps boost the color in any foliage that might be surrounding the waterfall. And so I find that to be an essential filter for that specific kind of photography. Sometimes I'll also use it when I'm doing coastal scenes, if I want to polarize some glare off of wet rocks and things like that. And the other filter that you still need for certain types of photography, once again, these filters aren't going to be used all the time. They have specific applications. The other is a neutral density filter, which is just a gray filter that blocks light coming in that allows you to achieve longer exposures. And so if you want to do any long exposure effects, like when I'm working coastal scenes in particular, that's when I reach for my neutral density filters because I'm typically trying to blur the motion of the waves. They're coming in and out. So I'm trying to get like about a half second or a 1 second exposure. And a lot of times you're shooting on the coast at sunrise and sunset, trying to capture that beautiful light, reflected in the water. And it can be very bright. And so it's sometimes very hard to achieve that long exposure that you want. And so you can use the ND filter to get that longer exposure to get that blur effect. So those are the two filters that I think you still need. You really can't recreate the way a polarizer gets rid of reflections in Lightroom or Photoshop. And neutral density filters, some cameras will have a mode that takes a bunch of photos and then will blend them together so you can simulate what it would look like if you used a neutral density filter, but not all cameras have that mode. And it doesn't necessarily give you the exact look that you get when you've got that longer exposure. So of the two, neutral density filter might be the one that at some point we won't need anymore. But I think with today's technology, most photographers will still need that. And definitely
Oh,
the
for sure.
polarizer is something that you just can't recreate the look that you get with a polarizer.
No, 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 not a bit. Thank you for
I would
that.
add one more thing on the polarizer. Water on green leaves works the same as water on rocks. For some reason, even though it's overcast,
Yeah.
the leaves really shine sometimes overly and overly shiny. And the polarizer will take care of that. I think we all know that. But
Yeah,
Yeah, especially if the leaves are wet. But even if they're dry, a lot of leaves have a waxy surface
yeah,
yeah.
that creates a lot of glare. So the polarizer just makes the foliage look so much more colorful.
It does. Yeah, just coming out of Olympic National Park, of course it rained up there in the whole rainforest, and even on the first dry day, I shot a few photographs without my
Mm.
polarizer, then I put it on. And just shooting ferns in the trees, the difference in dry foliage was absolutely amazing, to your point, Ian. There's
Yeah.
that waxy substance, especially on the broadsword ferns, and polarizers are essential. And yeah, I used like three different ND filters, strengths of ND filters during that workshop. And
yeah.
uh,
I'll add one more filter comment.
yeah,
For those of you who are new, for those of you who aren't new and have been listening to this podcast for years, you know what I'm going to say. But for those of you who are new, you don't want to put a retread on a Lamborghini. So if you have a really good lens, don't go and buy a 29.95 polarizer. There are no good ones. Make sure you get a good quality. I'm going to get into brands, but get a good quality filter that's going to go on the outside of your glass.
yep,
To Ian's point, the less glass you put on the end of your lens, the better off you're going to be. But sometimes you have to use this stuff. And if you're going to do it, put a good put as good a filter on as the lens you bought.
Yeah, yeah. Personally, I use filters made by Breakthrough. I think they've got some top-notch filters, but there's definitely some other high-quality filter
There,
companies out there.
just
There's no
use a good
shortage of
filter.
yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
use a good filter.
yeah.
Mhm.
So, Ian, where are you off to after after this podcast?
Well, I'll be leaving in a week to go down to the desert of South Central Utah. So I'll be leading some photo workshops down there, and it's just
Where are you based out of?
that's going to be based out of Hanksville.
Oh yeah, yep,
Yeah,
yep, yep.
place that no one ever knew existed until
Yeah.
photographers stared going there.
Yeah,
It's still a
like so
pretty
many.
yeah.
We could take up the rest of this podcast making a list of those places. It's crazy. But pretty soon there'll be a Marriott in Hanksville. I heard a rumor that they were the Navajo is trying to put a hotel at Horseshoe Bend. I don't think it ever came to fruition, but they did talk about it, believe it or not. It's kind of a crazy thing. And then after the rest of the year, you're going to be leading events in all over the world. Why don't you just give us a little synopsis? And folks, for those of you who are here, take advantage of these workshops. I mean, I got to tell you, other than me, I think Ian's the best workshop leader in the world. I can even do that with a straight face. Now,
Well,
Ian
Yeah.
leads a
thank you,
great,
Jim.
great workshop, but you should look into his opportunities. Where are you off to after Utah?
Yeah, well, so my next workshops after that are going to be in Badlands National Park. I do yearly workshops there where I teach both landscape and nightscape master classes. That's what I like to call them. So they're deep dives into both types of photography. And so the Badlands in South Dakota, one of my favorite places in the world to photograph. I love the landscape there. It is so colorful and textured, and getting into that landscape, getting away from the road and the overlooks, and just getting out into the Badlands formations. I find unique compositions every time I go there, stuff that no one's ever photographed before, and I just think
And it's
it's a
not
great place.
crazy crowded there. It's an amazing
Yeah.
place. It's
No, I mean, there's definitely a fair number of people that go there, but they never leave the road. And so you
right.
can walk a quarter mile away from the road round the corner past a Badlands formation where you can't see the road anymore, and it feels like you're just immersed in total wilderness.
Mm.
And and as I said, it's just there's an infinite variety of landscape compositions there. I love working there, especially during the summer. During the summer storm season, you get these massive thunderstorms that come in, and so I get the most amazing sunrise and sunset skies. I've seen more rainbows there than anywhere else, and so I love doing that workshop. It's a very focused teaching workshop where we take a deep dive into landscape composition, and my clients really enjoy it too. They love I love sharing my version of the Badlands to them, the world that I see when I'm there, and they have a great time. I've had some clients who've come back and done that workshop twice or even three times. So that to me tells me a lot about how enjoyable of an
Yeah,
experience it is.
for sure.
And- yeah, and I'll be back there again in September to do my nightscape workshop. Um, and let's see, I'm also going to be down in the bayou, the Big Cypress Bayou of East Texas in November. That's just another one of the domestic workshops that I do.
Where do you
And,
go down there?
sorry?
Whereabouts in Texas?
Oh, that's Caddo Lake.
Oh, well, maybe I'll see you there. I'm going to be there the first I think the second 2 weeks of November.
Yep, that's when I'm down there, and I bring my
Yeah,
own
you'll
motorboat
be
down
able,
there.
I'll be the one without the hair.
Yeah, okay.
Good.
At the
And
rate this is
then
falling out, I might also be without any hair.
you're going
Yeah.
to be fine. I think you're going to be a lot better off than John and I.
Join the club.
You have some international stuff. You do a fair amount of work outside of the United States.
Yeah, yeah. I'll let's see. Yeah, so I just got back from Argentina. I'll be in China later on this year.
Good
There's
for you.
probably a few more that I'm forgetting, and next year I've got tours lined up for Finland, for China, for Pakistan to go photograph the Karakoram Mountains. Yeah, so I try to keep pretty active. I like doing the domestic workshops. I like having very teaching focused workshops. I think that's a great
Yeah.
experience for people. But I also like to have a diversity of offerings. A lot of my clients want to travel to some really amazing photo destinations around the world, so I like to meet them where they want to be.
Do you have any issues going to Pakistan, for example? Is there any with the world the way it is? Are you having any issues with getting to where you want to go? Or
So far, lucky for me, knock on wood, I haven't had any problems in 21 years of international travel,
good
and
for
I've
you?
I've been to a few places that might be considered pretty dodgy by international travelers, and I've had fantastic experiences each and every time. That said, obviously there's a little bit of chaos out there, and certain places, definitely try to be strategic about it. Certain places are best avoided at certain times. But no, I haven't had any problems. I've always had wonderful experiences, and I would never take clients to a place that wouldn't be safe.
Well, folks, I have to tell you, post some information. In fact, all of Ian's information here on our.
Oop. For some reason, Jack has got an internet connection, both of us, before this podcast. We just having all sorts of technical troubles, so he is having a little bit of challenge with that. But to finish Jack's thought, I will post up all of Ian's information on our webpage, wetalkphoto.com. Ian, one last question for you before we wrap this thing up. One thing that strikes me when I look at your images is a really bold use of color. Have you always been so colorful, or is it something that sort of evolved as your photography's evolved?
I've always been so colorful, and it's the product of shooting color slide film for 10 years before
Yeah,
switching to digital. And you may remember Fujichrome Velvia,
of
which
course.
yeah, my favorite film. We used to call it Disney Chrome because it had a
Yeah.
really vibrant color palette and a lot of contrast. And so when I switched to digital, I wanted to maintain that. And so I tend to uh, I'm not sure that I'm not necessarily processing my images in a way that makes them exceptionally vibrant and high contrast. But I've looked for scenes where there's a lot of color and
Yeah.
a lot of contrast. I'm attracted to those scenes. And so actually my evolution in recent years has been moving the other way. And so, I've been doing this sort of Fujichrome Velvia look for most of my career. And in recent years, I feel like I've been maybe drifting away from that high contrast, high color look, and I'm looking for scenes and subjects that might have a little bit lower contrast and a more muted color palette. So I'm looking for scenes that might be a little bit more moody and ethereal as a result. And so I think I've got a foot in both worlds still. I haven't quite decided which
Yeah.
way I want to go in the future. But yeah, that's really the origin of that was so much
Oh,
time
that's
spent working with color
fantastic.
slide film.
Yeah. Well, I think it's natural too for us to evolve. I mean, our styles, everyone as artists sort of
Mm.
grow and change, and we can evolve into different likes. I mean, we like something one day and something else another day, and it's all good and it's all right. And
Yeah.
yeah, no, I get it. No, I'm a Fujifilm shooter too, so they have all those film simulations
Uh,
in the digital cameras. So of course, Velvy is right there close to the top as a film simulation.
yeah. And,
Um,
I think when you shoot film, it really forces you to understand how light and color work.
yeah,
And I think a lot of photographers that grew up in the digital age, they don't have that background. And so that's one of the things that I teach when I'm with clients is, okay, this is what's going to happen at sunset. And you may not notice this because your brains do a little bit of auto white balance correction. But when that sunset sky explodes with color, that light's going to bounce down onto the landscape. My experience from the days of film was that we're suddenly going to get this beautiful reddish golden glow on the landscape. And
mm,
it's going to produce these otherworldly colors. And a lot of digital photographers, they don't have that experience and they don't see it because the automatic white balance correction on their cameras takes away those color casts. And so, knowing how light and color works when you're out there making photos makes a big difference. It can allow you to chase those moments when you're going to get that really rich, vibrant color palette.
agreed, agreed. Kind of even just tying just I'm sorry, I just kind of keep this going, but tying back to you were talking about how you instruct folks around the art of composition and how things are sort of assembled in a composition and the amount of color, the kind of the shade of color and the distribution of that color throughout an image can have a very profound psychological impact on the viewer. Because we there's a psychology to color and where those colors are in the photograph and how much of them are really can affect the mood. And so even understanding that in the art of composition is extremely important.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And, once again, film photographers, I think, would learn more about color theory than a lot of digital photographers
Yeah.
because we would see the results of shooting in mixed light, for example, shooting at sunset where there's golden light on the scene, but the shadows would turn blue. And, that's something that, once again, your automatic white balance correction will often eviscerate that. And so you don't see it, but when you shoot film, it's there. And so, we learn to chase those mixed light scenes to get
Yeah.
that complementary color scheme, that warm, cool contrast. And this is something artists have been using for centuries in paintings.
Right.
And so, as film photographers, we really learn to embrace that and to chase that. And so, I think a lot of digital photographers don't really have that experience. So that's just one of the things I like teaching people.
Yep, one of those things to bring to them. All right, I will shut up and quit asking you questions. I can go on forever, Ian. So Jack has, I think, officially departed the scene because he's just having internet trouble. So with that, I apologize. We'll reach back out to you, Ian. Jack will, I know for sure. But thank you, my friend, for being here. This was an awesome discussion.
Well, it's been an honor and a privilege. Thank you so much, John and Jack, wherever you are, for having me on.
Yes.
And I'd love to connect with you guys again. Thanks.
You
Bye bye.
bet, you bet. So, folks, stay tuned. If you have any questions, again, questions, comments, we talk photo at gmail.com. Stay tuned for our next episode. And with that, Ian, I'll just wish you safe travels and have a great day.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
All right, and bye bye, folks.